A railway line linking the two cities of Manchester and Sheffield had been opened in 1845.
Many of its fine bridges, viaducts and tunnels still exist to this day. However, in 1855, just a decade after its opening, one part of this railway collapsed, endangering several dozen lives. It was only the quick thinking of a handful of individuals that saved the day. So we're setting off from the site of the former Thurgoland station up to the Thurgoland Tunnel, where that potential disaster could have unfolded. We're now making our way in a westerly direction up the trail towards the site of the original tunnel. However, before we get there, I want to look at the remains of this old bridge. Now, we have run and walked past here literally hundreds of times in the last few years, and I've always wondered why this bridge is incomplete and has been deconstructed.
In researching this video, we found the answer.
It seems to have gone from Little Huthwaite House here, across the railway line, leading to a private conservatory belonging to the house, and the conservatory being no longer there. The tunnel we can see looming towards us as we walk up the trail is the newer tunnel built after the Second World War during the electrification of this Woodhead line.
However, this path to the past veers off to the right.
As we approach the original tunnel, variously known as the Huthwaite Tunnel, the Thurgoland Tunnel and the Romtickle Tunnel. You can see today it's been partially blocked off by this infill, but if you climb to the top of this mound, it is possible to peer inside this old tunnel. We can have a peek inside 180 years of history. We are standing at the eastern end of the Thurgoland Tunnel that was opened in 1845.
We're 3 miles east of Penistone.
And about 1.5 miles west of where Wortley Station was. So though this tunnel is long disused and as you can see has been blocked up so you can't really get access into it, on the 14th of July 1855 there was an incident here which nearly resulted in a major railway disaster.
So let's find out what happened and how disaster was averted.
Whilst Dawn climbs up to get a better look at the top of the tunnel, we have this description from an early journey along the line. Emerging from this cutting, we pass over a high embankment near Wortley Forge, at which place, leaving the beauteous and varied landscape in its vicinity on the left, we pass through another beautiful piece of work, the Huthwaite Tunnel, extending through 300 yards of solid grit stone with a neatly castellated entrance. Sadly, that castellated entrance at either side is no longer with us. What a shame it was removed at some point. So Dawn is standing just yards from where this 1845 tunnel collapsed. At 9:15 AM on the 14th of July 1855, a group of labourers were working in a nearby field when they heard a rumbling sound, a grinding sound, and they rushed to the tunnel to find that there had been a collapse. So we're going to walk through the newer tunnel, which was opened when the line was electrified after the Second World War, to find out more about this intriguing story. As we make our way along the new tunnel, here's some footage in the old tunnel at the very spot where the collapse took place, and many thanks to Ant from Trekking Exploration for this footage. So strange to think that 170 years ago this part of the tunnel had collapsed. There had been heavy rainfall in the hours preceding the collapse, and the rain had seeped through the layer of shale which was above the tunnel and led to the collapse of this tunnel, which was only 10 years old at the time. Just moments before the collapse, a luggage train had passed through the tunnel, so a narrow escape from disaster there. One of the labourers quickly informed the porter at Wortley Station, about a mile down the line, of the collapse. So now at the western end of the tunnel, where the Wortley Station porter stood on top of that tunnel, waving a flag to stop the train that was coming down from Penistone from going through the tunnel and causing a great disaster. Signals are also placed along the line for trains coming from the Sheffield side to halt them before they reach the tunnel. Imagine the pounding hearts and panic that were being experienced 170 years ago at this very spot. Little quarry here. I'm actually wondering whether some of the stone used to build the tunnel and the nearby Romtickle Viaduct, which is about 200 yards in that direction as I speak, was quarried from this very spot by, I think it was Crawshaw brothers were the contractors for this particular part of the line. We have done a video about how one of the Crawshaws met a sorry and sad end whilst building the Romtickle Viaduct, so check that one out. So now I'm going to walk over the line of the tunnel, which I believe from reports of the time was covered with several feet of shale. What happened during the night and early morning of the 14th of July was there being heavy rainfall, and it seeped through the shale, causing some of the tunnel to drop under the weight. Now when I looked, the tunnel had had a few engineering issues along the way in the 10 years since it actually been opened. So this was another example of perhaps some little imperfections along this part of the line that was built by the Crawshaw brothers. Nice view of the old tunnel opening from up here. So tunnel here, just about 10-20 yards to our right as we make our way along this footpath.
So disaster has been averted, but there are still two problems to address. The first one is how the passengers get between Penistone and Sheffield.
And the second issue is how to repair the tunnel at the greatest possible haste. So to solve problem number one, on the day of the tunnel collapse, up steps a man called Vincent Corbett. So fantastic, disaster had been averted, but we still have a very busy railway line running from Manchester into Sheffield. So what of the passengers who needed to get through despite the tunnel being blocked?
So the train that was coming down from Penistone went back there and the passengers got on another train.
So that second train came down as far as Romtickle, where we just passed, and the male passengers alighted and walked probably over this very path that we've just walked on now, whereas the female passengers were fortunate enough to receive a ride in a carriage courtesy of the man who lived at Huthwaite Hall, which we're going to look at now. Now the tunnel ran under the grounds of Huthwaite Hall, and it was 4 labourers who had been hoeing turnips on the day who had heard the sound of the tunnel collapsing. So it's reasonably likely that the field the turnip hoeing was going on might have been this very field, because it's the one we can see associated with Huthwaite Hall that appears to be closest to the eastern end of the tunnel.
Or possibly the men walked through these woods.
Yeah, we don't know exactly the route they would have taken, but you can imagine a group of railway passengers, male, walking from one end of the tunnel to the other, which we reckon to be a couple of 100 yards in that direction. So we think this is all the spoil that was put on top of the tunnel in order to provide the protection so it wouldn't collapse, but obviously wasn't enough. We're definitely at the right spot, because down there I can see the alternative path that we went up about 20 yards to stand at the foot of the old tunnel. I can even see the little bit of concrete that goes across the trail there. So here we go, as legally and as safely as we're going to get to the top of the first Thurgoland Tunnel. In fact, is it the Thurgoland Tunnel? When doing this research, I found it referred to as the Thurgoland Tunnel, the Wortley Tunnel and the Huthwaite Tunnel. So we have another contender for the turnip hoeing field. Because this is right over the tunnel, it's possible this field behind us was where the hoeing of turnips was going on, and therefore that's why the workmen could hear the tunnel collapsing basically under our feet, because it was only a few yards into the tunnel the collapse took place.
Amazing.
The owner of Huthwaite Hall at the time, which you can see behind me, was a gentleman by the name of Vincent Corbett. Yes, he emerges rather well from this, lending his private horses and carriages to transport the ladies from one end of the tunnel to the other, where there'll be another train waiting for them. Sadly for Vincent Corbett, he was to die 6 years later at a railway station, at Wortley Station, about a mile further down the track there, of a heart attack. So not a railway disaster, but you know, a sad end for a man who, in this particular story, comes across as generous. He was also one of the iron masters of Wortley Top Forge, about half a mile from here, which will be another video all of its own. Yes, Vincent Corbett had lent his private carriages to get the ladies from one end of the tunnel to the other, whilst the male passengers had walked over the top of the tunnel. But the railway company couldn't let that state of affairs continue. They hired omnibuses in the days between the tunnel collapsing and the tunnel being fixed. So how was the tunnel fixed? Well, a man called Mr. North, who was the head contractor of the Sheffield, Manchester and Lincolnshire Railway, the company that owned the line at that particular point, made his way up to the collapsed tunnel. He collected together 300 workmen from all along the line. He also commandeered another 200 workmen from Grimsby Docks, and they worked through Saturday, Sunday and Monday to get the tunnel open. They put timbers up to secure the roof, but unfortunately those timbers fell down. But fortunately no one was injured. And that delayed the reopening of the tunnel for a further few days. So it took quite a lot of work to get the tunnel open, but within just over a week it was open again to passengers and freight.
So before we leave the probable turnip hoeing field, let's remember all those quick-thinking individuals that acted on that day. Thomas Marsden, Joseph Marsden, William Laycock and Robert Parker.
Yes, well done gents for your quick thinking, and we will remember you today when making this video. We're now walking along the very picturesque Huthwaite Lane in order to get down to Thurgoland Station, which was a very short-lived station. I think it only existed about a decade. Still trying to dig out a bit more information about it. No pictures available. So what we find really interesting, living very close to the Woodhead line, is digging out all these stories of acts of heroism, of tales of disaster along the route. If you'd like to hear more of these, then please subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free, and we are uploading content both about this line and all the places we visit around the country on a regular basis.
So we hope you can join us next time, where every journey begins with a path to the past.